Ron Howard is a director who believes in pride, moderation, and kindness. He has always been the calm in the middle of chaos. But his face changed when he was asked about the bad side of the business that had raised him. He once said in a quiet voice, "You wouldn't believe what those legends did when the cameras stopped." He didn't think the golden age of Hollywood was golden at all. Things were kept quiet, people were mean, and people were taken advantage of. A world where fame made everything okay. Behind closed doors, the same people who shaped America's hopes also destroyed many lives. After many years, Ron Howard is now ready to say their names. This is Errol Flynn, the bad guy behind the smile. Before there were James Bond or Jack Sparrow, there was Errol Flynn, the brave hero who was all beauty, danger, and wild desire. He was the perfect explorer on screen. He was more like a predator when he wasn't on film. Flynn was born in Tasmania in 1909 and moved to Hollywood in the 1930s. After Captain Blood, 1935, he became a star quickly. The studios built a kingdom around his charm, but he was actually a man who was addicted to drugs and spoiled. By 1942, he had a terrible image. Peggy Satterlee and Betty Hansen, two young girls, said Flynn raped them legally. The trial, which was in every newspaper, caused a split in America. Flynn laughed during his statement and made fun of the charges, acting like his fame protected him from being hurt. Warner Brothers hired top lawyers. Fans set up camp in front of the building, and studio execs paid witnesses to disappear in secret. He wasn't guilty. Even so, his actions only got worse. In private emails that were made public in 1978, Flynn bragged about the women he had sex with and make fun of the ones who were afraid of him. Ron Howard once said that reading about that trial was the moment he understood that Hollywood would protect monsters as long as they smiled for the camera. The people still saw Flynn as a bad guy. To people who knew him, he was a warning. He was controlled by alcohol, drugs, and losing all of his money. He died in Vancouver in 1959, when he was only 50 years old, after being abused for years. Heart failure, cirrhosis, and stomach ulcers were found in his medical report. For Howard, though, the real reason was easier to see. He lived and died the same way. He took everything and gave nothing. Flynn's story showed how Hollywood's morals can fall apart. This is a good lesson that fame doesn't forgive bad behavior, and that charm can hide it. This is Kirk Douglas, the man who always fought. Ron Howard saw Kirk Douglas as the best example of how Hollywood's golden age could be contradictory. On screen, he talked about honor and justice, but off-screen, he spread fear and shame. Douglas was born Ezer Daniel Danilowitz in 1916 to poor immigrant parents. He got out of poverty by working hard and not giving up. He had everything by the time Spartacus made him famous around the world. Well-known, wealthy, and liked. His violent anger, on the other hand, was something that people who worked with him remembered. It never went away when the cameras stopped rolling. Crew members said Douglas was hard to please and would get so angry out of the blue that it would make them cry. Deborah Paday, an actress, once said that he didn't just want to take over a scene. He wanted to be in charge of everyone there. Howard later said, "There's a kind of rage under that smile, the kind that eats a person alive." He had watched Douglas's performances as a young filmmaker. Douglas would always be angry no matter what he did. For decades, rumors about how he treated women have been going around Hollywood. Both biographers and sources have said that he was involved in the rape of 16-year-old rising star Natalie Wood in the 1950s, a claim that came up after Wood's death and was made again by her sister Lana in her 2018 book. The story of Douglas was buried under the same system of silence that kept many important men of his time safe. Douglas was never charged. The scandal came up again after he died in 2020 at the age of 103, but this time it wasn't just talk. It was a confession. When he was on film sets, he could inspire and scare at the same time. Stan Kubry, who guided him twice, said, "He is the most driven man I have ever met and the hardest to guide." Ron Howard once said that Douglas's life taught him not about ability or fame, but about power. Hollywood agreed with him that the rules didn't apply to him. It was thought that Douglas was an old man looking for peace when he took an honorary Oscar in 1996. For Howard, though, it was something else. the last show of a performer who had spent his whole life running away from his own problems. Behind the cheers was a truth that Hollywood never wanted to face. Some of its most famous figures became famous not for being smart, but for being scared. Faye Dunaway is the cruel queen. If Kirk Douglas stood for unchecked anger and Errol Flynn for greed, then something colder was shown by Faye Dunaway. It's wicked wrapped in beauty. Ron Howard saw her as proof that Hollywood bad guys didn't always beat people up. It happened sometimes through power, shame, and egos that were so big they crushed everyone else. Dunaway's rise was very fast. She was born in 1941 in Bascom, Florida. From Bonnie and Clyde in 1967 to Chinatown in 1974, she seemed invincible, like a goddess of movies who was both cold and attractive. But behind her brilliance, rumors spread through the business that she was mean. Crew members talked about her temper tantrums, her never-ending list of demands, and how she treated her helpers like they were useless. Ruthanna Alda, who played her Mommy Dearest co-star, once said, "You could feel the fear on set." Everyone was ready for her to blow up. The movie that was supposed to be a dark look at abuse turned out to be a reflection of Dunaway herself. As a strange coincidence, Dunaway is said to have behaved badly when she played the cruel Joan Crawford. Later, director Frank Perry admitted that he thought about leaving because of her violent attacks. She threw things and yelled at makeup artists, and one time she wouldn't let them film her until the lights made her look beautiful. Years later, Ron Howard used her as an example of what can happen when an actor's need to be in charge turns into emotional terrorism. There were more stories. In the movie The Wicked Lady, Dunaway is said to have hit a cameraman and spat at a team member. It was said that she made her helpers feel bad until work stopped for a day. She used to... Someone in charge of Faye said, "She doesn't just play divas, she becomes them." In the 2000s, her bad name caught up with her. The calls from Hollywood stopped. Directors wouldn't work with her because they said she was too difficult to handle. When Dunaway was fired from a Broadway staging of Tea at 5 in 2011, she put the blame on everyone but herself. When a reporter asked Ron Howard about her impact, he gave a polite but direct answer. She worked so hard to be perfect that she forgot to be kind. Dunaway's fall didn't happen quickly. The pieces slowly fell apart. The woman who once ruled Hollywood ended up alone, and was even shunned at screenings of her own movies. Howard saw her as the cost of being mean, and she was a warning that ability without compassion will destroy itself in the end. He once said that people talk about power, but in Hollywood, power without style is like poison. John Wayne was the cruel leader of the West. John Wayne was one of the most famous people in Hollywood. For many, he represented everything that was great about America. The brave cowboy, fighter, or man's man. But for Ron Howard, who grew up watching him on black and white TV, the man behind that rough picture was much darker. When Howard learned what he was really like, he stopped seeing him as a hero. "I saw the mean guy who dressed up as his country." Wayne worked his way up through the studio system by creating a myth of unbreakable manhood. He was born Marion Morrison in Iowa in 1907. In the 1950s, he was in more than just movies. His ideas were ideas. He thought that growth was a sign of weakness and that dissent was an act of betrayal. On movie sets, he was scary and in charge. Technicians who didn't do what he wanted were scolded in front of everyone. Chris Mitchum, another actor, once said, "When Duke was mad, the air froze. Either you agreed with him or you left." In the end, Howard said that mood was the opposite of art. It's fear acting like it is being punished. Wayne was mean to people outside of work, too. He was known for putting down women in public, making fun of Native American players on Western sets, and ignoring black actors who didn't fit the mold. His conversation with Playboy in 1971 is still one of the most upsetting records of the golden age of Hollywood. During the talk, he said that Native Americans were keeping land for their own selfish reasons, that black people were not yet responsible enough to run their own lives, and that movies needed guys, not whiners. When the comments came up again decades later, they caused anger because they showed that the man wasn't a patriot, but someone stuck in hate. Wayne and director John Ford had a very bad argument on the set of The Searchers because Ford insisted on making racist and angry Confederate Ethan Edwards seem like a good guy. Ford fought back. Wayne said no. Even though the character was mean in the final cut, so was the actor's disrespect. Ron Howard, who later studied that performance at USC, said, "It's scary because you can't tell the difference between the man and the role." Wayne never said sorry, not even in his last years when he was weak from cancer. He thought his critics were weak and said that the changing society made him fee.